how did you get here? That's the question that the origin story answers. The reason that we have an origin story is it shows people why we exist. And those who can resonate with it will believe in the same thing we believe. It is the world you're building. This is the one that's really powerful in recruiting conversations. If everything goes according to plan for the next 10 years, how does the world look different because of your success?
Today's guest may not be a stranger to you if you've been following me for any period of time, as I had him on my show prior to this, but he is on a new journey now, a journey that I am super excited about for him and for you, because he is all about helping us tell better stories. If you follow me for any period of time, you know that being able to communicate your message to the right people in a way that compels them to take action is so critical for you being able to effectively attract, hire, and retain the right people. But telling stories, writing the story, sharing the story seems to be such a challenge for so many of us. But after today's episode, you are going to have the tools and the techniques to be able to go do this on your own. I'm so excited and very proud to know today's guest, Zac Garside, with The Storytelling Habit. Zac, it is so great to have you on the show again.
I love it. I love being back, man. I love coming from a different angle this time.
Yeah, and it's been a little while since we talked last time. I think it's been over a year, and you're doing something different now, and something that is so exciting for me because it's something that we talk a lot about in the work we do with our clients, and that is story and being able to tell a story. And so many entrepreneurs are not good at this.
Yeah.
But if this is my opinion, they have some of the coolest stories to tell. So today, what I'd love to do is I'd love to know a little bit more about what you're doing and how you work with businesses to tell them their story. So let's start first with, tell me a little bit about you. And then my question to you is, why is it that you think people struggle with this piece so much?
Well, I'm happy to go into all that. First of all, I'll just share background of how I got into this. For those who have heard me before, I used to be the CEO of Power Selling Pros. I worked there for 8 years, coaching customer service teams in the industry, call centers. When I was there, I remember the first trade show I ever went to, the QSC Power meeting in Anaheim, California, 2017. And Brigham, the owner of Power Selling Pros, he got up on the stage and he told his story. He told the story of building a business, going to zero, starting from scratch, and discovering the problem of call centers, how the call center is so neglected and overlooked, and you're spending all this money on ads, but if the people who are answering the phones aren't trained to book those calls, then what's the point? You're booking 50% of your calls. The rest are going and doing business with someone else. You're paying somebody else's advertising costs. And that was just such a powerful story. I thought, wow, that's really cool. But it didn't hit me how powerful that was until I was speaking to one of my favorite clients after. And he said, oh yeah, when Brigham told me that story, it was like I could see myself. It made perfect sense that you'd want to convert more of your phone calls into customers. That was the first time back in 2017 when it clicked for me, the power of storytelling. I realized, wow, we get up here all the time and we spill the facts and the knowledge and the nuance of our field of expertise, of the product that we sell, the service we offer. But ultimately, nobody cares about any of that. People care about the story. So I committed at that time to becoming good at telling stories. And I got lots of practice while I was at Power Selling Pros for 6 years. I went on countless podcasts, did more webinars than I could possibly count, spoke on stages, and eventually decided it was time for me to build a business around this skill, helping people develop this.
But also get your story out there, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You just told your story. I love it. You're sharing your story as we start talking about stories. And so you now have a business where you work with entrepreneurs to hone this skill. And this is really for people that want to be able to tell their story. Is that right? People that enjoy this.
As we build, we'll create more programs, more opportunities for people that don't quite know yet and need to learn. But right now, it's people who are aware of the problem.
Yeah. So for people that are out there listening right now, they're like, yeah, like if they've heard me talk at all, I talk about the importance of story, especially when it comes to recruiting and why people need to connect to your company and your culture through story versus a list of bullet points. They've heard me talk on that before. So why is it that you think that so many people struggle with this? I mean, it's why you have this new opportunity in life, this new path. is people struggle with this. They need help with it. Why is it that people struggle?
Every single client I work with has the same problem. They don't think their story is interesting.
It's so disappointing. I was just telling you, everybody thinks that they don't have good story to tell, but their stories are so fascinating.
The decision, every great entrepreneur, every great business had a moment where they needed to decide something, decide to go all in on your company, to decide to fire that partner that you built it all with. The decision is what makes it interesting. And the second thing is, name a movie that you like. What's a good movie you've seen recently?
Good movie recently. I don't know. That's loaded. But one of my favorite movies is Matrix.
Okay.
Let's go with that.
Matrix. Dang it. I've never seen The Matrix, but let's go with Avengers. Have you seen Avengers Endgame?
Avengers. Let's do Avengers.
Everybody's seen Avengers Endgame. So we're going to go with that one. You've got a 3-hour movie, and the first 2 hours cover literally years of time. There's years and then weeks and weeks of time being covered in that 2 hours. The final 60 minutes of the movie is zooming in on just a few minutes of battle on this battlefield. It's the art of zooming in on the conflict or the climax is what makes stories interesting to people. So anytime an entrepreneur says, I don't have an interesting story to tell, I know it's a lie because I ask questions that get them to zoom in on the little internal struggles, internal conflicts, pain that they felt, uncertainty that they've experienced. Those are the things we actually care about. And so I try to pull that out of people, and that helps us get to something that people resonate with.
That's so cool as you're talking about that. And I think about the end of Avengers there. It's that zooming in for me that makes it relatable. It makes me go, oh yeah, now it makes sense. Like I look at years of spanning in Avengers and I'm like, yeah, time travel stuff, this, that, and everything else. But when it's the battlefield and it's life or death and it's loved ones and it's that zooming in, now I'm more connected to it.
Moments of change, moments of decision, and moments of consequence. Those are the 3 moments that every story has.
I love that. And then, so somebody says, okay, you know what? Maybe you're right, Zac. Maybe my story's cool. Maybe. How do you help them find that story?
I start with well, here's what's interesting. Anytime you go up to somebody and ask them, tell me a story, they just blank out. They're like, I don't know. It's funny how life works that way. When you're in conversation and somebody's like, tell me a joke, suddenly you can't think of a single joke to save your life.
Yeah.
When you ask somebody to tell me a story, they can't think of it. They just completely blank out.
Mm-hmm.
So I start by asking them, what's your domain? What's your area of expertise? And let's take plumbing, for example. Like, I'm a plumber. Okay, great. You're a plumber. That's the topic. Next, what is a really common plumbing problem? So we're going to start phase 1. What's your domain? Phase 2, what is a problem in that domain? Something that you know the answer to. And they'll say, well, leaky faucets. Okay. Now let's go to the third layer. What is the answer to that problem? And they give their answer to that problem, right? Get a plumber out there to fix the leak. Okay, great. Now the fourth layer, this is where it gets interesting. What's your unique point of view on that problem? How are other people approaching this wrong? And why do you have a better way? Essentially, what makes you different? And they'll say, well, I think this, or I believe this. And that's when it's starting to get really interesting. Like, I think that most other plumbers are price gouging the customer. They're dishonest. They're shady. They're fake. I'm like, okay, now we're getting to something interesting here. And then the fifth and final layer, which is where the story comes from, is how did you figure that out? And that's the question. Once I ask, how did you figure that out? They immediately tell a story.
Wow.
By asking those 5 questions, I can get a story out of anybody.
Okay, so they answer these 5 problems and we dig in and we get these zoom in on these little moments and we get them with having a story. Now, what do they do with it?
Whatever you want.
I mean, how are your clients using this?
My clients use it in a couple different ways. Number one is sales conversations. The origin story of a company is the most versatile sales and marketing tool that you have. You can use it to overcome objections in a sales conversation. You can use it in your marketing collateral on like your about page, when you're given a presentation. The best way to start though is sales conversations, because sales conversations allow you to test it out before you print it and put it on all over the place where you can't change it, or at least where you feel like you can't change it.
Thinking that you could use it and practice it and see how the market reacts.
Exactly. And it's super low risk. Like you go out there on a sales conversation, somebody gives an objection, and we've all heard the classic objection handling technique, feel, felt, found. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
Feel, felt, found is a story. Like, I understand how you feel. I have felt similarly, or others have felt similarly. Here's what we have found. That is literally a story. So you just translate that into whatever story you have to tell about solving that problem the customer has.
We've talked about the hero's journey, right? That's a framework for creating a story, a much more complex framework than the ones you're sharing. I think there's like 9 or 10 stages or questions to it.
That's for nerd.
One of the things that we do over here at Core Matters is we help people with recruiting and filling their frontline positions, customer service reps included, which is why you and I met through Power Selling Pros when you were there. And we talk about creating a story. We call it the core story because your core is the thing that's central to your organization, it's your culture. It's where your culture comes from. It's where that intentionality comes from. It's the start of the flywheel, if you will, to keep your business going when it comes to recruiting. And we talk about being able to create this story that you can use in your recruiting efforts. So you talked about using it in sales efforts, but I could see also using this for recruiting.
Both. Yeah.
Does this framework work for all kinds of stories? So instead of building a story for customers, could you build a story for why you're growing a business and why you need to recruit and hire people? Like, could you use that same framework for that?
100%. When I roll out storytelling in a business, I roll it out in phases.
Stop turning away work, burning out your team, and working so hard. Learn about the proven process that businesses everywhere are using to save time, save money, and hire all the people they need. We'll train your team to implement and run this process in-house so you can grow as fast as you want. Book a call with our team at corematters.com.
Phase 1 is sales and recruiting because those are the lowest risk ways to test it and roll it out. Your sales conversations, your recruiting efforts to get people to want to come work for you. The second level is your website. Put it on the about page, put it on the home page. The third layer is, and not everybody goes into this, but is your actual advertising, using it in videos, using it in stuff that you spend quite a bit of money on production for. And then the fourth layer is if you're ever going to teach. So you're going to go teach at a workshop or at a conference. But layer 1 is sales and recruiting. And there's 4 core stories if you want me to go into those.
I'd love to hear it. And that was something too that I just learned is that you and I both have core stories. So not to confuse everybody, we only have one. It's all about your culture and all about why you're building a company and why these people are going to care. You've got 4 core stories. Let's break those down for us.
Yeah, I bet there's probably a lot of crossover between your core story and the 4 that I talk about. But the 4 core stories are, number 1, your origin story, which is how did you get here? That's the question that the origin story answers. The reason that we have an origin story is it shows people why we exist. And those who can resonate with it will believe in the same thing we believe. It is the world you're building. This is the one that's really powerful in recruiting conversations. If everything goes according to plan for the next 10 years, how does the world look different because of your success? That's the strategic story. The third story is the self-belief story, which is when a customer or an employee thinks that you're awesome, they think that your company is great, they naturally wonder, where do I personally fit? Do I personally have what it takes to be successful here? And the self-belief story is a story about the people. It's a story that allows them to see how they personally can be successful within the company or as a customer. And then the fourth and final story is the surroundings story, is what I call it. It instills a belief in people that they can be successful working for you or buying from you despite their surroundings, despite the fact that they have an unsupportive spouse or network, despite the fact that money's tight, that the economy is not the way they want it to be, that inflation's kicking their butts. If you can get people to believe in you, your origin story, the future you're building, your vision story, themselves, and that they can be successful despite their surroundings, those 4 things, you've basically hit all of the motivators behind what causes people to do what they do.
There is a little overlap, but I would say that the self-belief and the surrounding stories, I mean, those have got to be so impactful. And what I hear when you say that is we're zooming in. We're zooming in. And it goes back to what you were saying before. You start origin, big picture, where we came from, vision, where we're going, very nebulous. We don't always know where we're going or how we're going to get there. Then we start zooming in and we say, okay, what's self-beliefs? How do we get people to start seeing themselves in the story? And then that surroundings, or what I wrote down was success.
Yeah.
That's really where I see the success come from. And you're not alone, right? You're not alone and you can overcome this. We can do it together. Those are, wow. So you teach people to take these 4 stories, I'm imagining, and become experts at telling them. Is that?
Yeah.
Right?
We want to make the stories themselves good, and then we want to figure out how to deliver them in the best way possible.
And now how do we do that? What's the next step? So we've zoomed in. We started looking at our little moments. We've started understanding, okay, we have a great story to tell. We started putting together a framework for how we tell this story. And then we come up with these 4 core stories. So how do we take that next step? Which is, what do we do with this now? We've got these great stories. You don't want to just put them on a poster in the break room wall, right?
Yeah.
Which is where most of these end up.
For a blue collar company, there's 3 things you should do with your stories. Okay. Number 1 is get your sales team together, get your sales manager together, make a list of all of the most common objections you get, the 5 to 10 most common objections, and attach a story to each one. Teach your guys which story they can tell for which objection to knock it down. Stories are extremely powerful for all the other companies are overcoming objections in the standard ways. Nobody else is going to be telling stories to overcome objections, but customers will love that from you. I've experienced it. That's how I overcame objections when I was running sales at Power Selling Pros. That's number 1. Number 2, you use it to recruit. You put 20 business cards in your wallet, and every time you see an incredible person at a restaurant or some other place that you purchase from or you do business with, you tell them your origin story. You tell them a story that will make them want to come work for you. Use it in your recruiting efforts. And then the third thing is you use it in training. You got a captive audience when you're training your employees, when you are sitting them down and working on improvement. And yeah, you could go through, here are the 3 ways to solve this problem or do this job. And you should do that. But what do people really want to know? That big question. How did you figure this out? And tell the stories of how you figured out the stuff you're training your employees on. Your workshops will become so much more engaging. Your employees will retain what you teach them significantly better. When I became the CEO of Power Selling Pros, job number 1, earn people's trust. Get these people to trust the new leader of the company, right? What was the first thing I did? I gathered the company together and I told them a story about a big screw up that I had just a few weeks prior and how I handled it. And the chat was flooded after that with people going, thank you for your vulnerability. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, that was a great story. Stories are quite simply the quickest way to influence people.
Yeah, no, it's so many different ideas I'm having about this story, but I love that bringing people in and making them feel like they're not alone. Like one of the things that I've learned through selling story is that when you can let people know that you're not alone, they're not alone. Other people are going through this. It opens a conversation in ways that you can't imagine. And I think that what you're talking about here, using it for sales, that's your team being able to share that and go, hey, you're not alone. And look, here's a story on how we overcome this and how we deal with these things. And it makes it real. It makes people go, okay, if they've solved it for others, they can solve it for me. And I love that you're doing it through story instead of just objection handling. Like that's always been one of my worst things when it comes to sales, objection handling. No one wants to be handled. That's
a good point. Yeah. Nobody wants to be handled.
Yeah. And then the recruiting, of course, that's where I'm super passionate about. And story is so important there. And then training. I love that. How did you figure this out? So much power in story. And I love that you are helping entrepreneurs do this. And I know that you have resources available. You've got some training and coaching for those listening that want to learn more about this. How do people get a hold of you and how do they probably even follow you just so they can hear you tell the stories too? How do people connect with you?
ZacGarside.com is the most straightforward way. ZACGARSIDE. And you can go at Zac Garside on any of your favorite social media platforms. And I'm there telling stories all the time.
There's training and there's some free stuff that people can get, downloads, anything like that.
If you go to ZacGarside.com, immediately at the top of the homepage, you'll be able to get the 4 core stories formula. It's a step-by-step guide that'll help you craft and clarify your 4 core stories for your business. And at the simplest level, when you're in a sales conversation, someone gives an objection, you just transition to the story by saying, well, it's interesting. We have another customer, John. And then you tell a story. That's it. It's interesting. You should say that. And boom, now you're in storytelling mode and you're different from everyone else.
That is so great. So much awesome information here. And I cannot wait to see what you do with what you're doing now, what your clients start doing. I mean, you've already shared with me some of the amazing results they're getting and just really being able to tell a story. And I'm super passionate about this as well. We're going to find some ways to get some more of this information in front of the people we talk to as well, because you said it. Number 2 is recruiting. If you're not telling story, recruiting becomes a lot harder because you're not standing out. So
yeah.
Zac, thank you so much for your time today. I've really enjoyed this episode. It's so great to talk to you again.
Man, thank you, Ryan. You're the man.